In today's video, we have a variety of news to talk about, including some signings, including some prospects, players going to the KHL. We also have some updates on the CBA talks between the league and the Players Association, and we have some off-season rumors concerning the Canucks and the Buffalo Sabres. We'll jump into all the latest coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of news topics to discuss today, so let's jump in and get started here with some updates on the CBA and the potential extension that the NHL and the NHLPA are trying to negotiate. Of course, both the league and the Players Association had an opportunity to opt out early this past September and chose not to. They've been having talks on and off really ever since. There hasn't been as much discussions during this recent NHL pause because they've had so many other things to worry about and talk about. I mean, there has been some talks, but things seem to be intensifying here a little bit as of late, and there's a latest update here being reported on by guys like Darren Dreger as well as Elliot Friedman. So here's a quote here from Friedman on the latest discussions. Friedman says, sources have said the NHL and the NHLPA have been working hard on the CBA and they could be trying to get it done before they start playing again. The league wants long-term stability, the players want a cap on escrow, and word is that's being considered. If the season does not resume, their hit would be 35%. Even if there are games, there's looking at 27 or 28%. I heard rumblings of a 20% escrow cap over the next few years. Others have said they've heard it could be even less. A flat salary cap of $81.5 million for a few seasons is a possibility too. So obviously a long-term labor agreement between the league and the players would be a welcome sign for all of them as well as us fans, and not have to worry about a work stoppage for an extended period of time. Of course, there's several other issues besides these here, but of course, right now with the pandemic and the pause and the lost revenue, of course, those are big-time factors. Escrow was already an issue for the players, and obviously the salary cap is an issue for both sides. Of course, the owners, I'm sure, as you can imagine from a business standpoint, want to make as much money as they can, and of course, the players do as well, so they have to hammer out what is fair in that regard. Of course, though, from a player standpoint, they're probably looking at other things like the Olympics as being a potential issue as well, and there's all kinds of things here. So if they can hammer out an agreement on a CBA extension before they start playing, like Elliot Friedman's alluding to, that there is some hope on, that would be absolutely huge news and create some labor peace for an extended period of time, because especially now with all this lost revenue in the NHL pause, they need to work together now more than ever to make sure there's long-term viability here on both sides of the business equation. So as I mentioned as well, there's some signing news. Of course, we have a prospect signing as well as some players heading back to the KHL. The prospect signing, of course, was the Detroit Red Wings announcing that they've signed 2019 second-round selection Albert Johansson, who's a left-shot defenseman out of Sweden. Of course, we saw the Red Wings use many of their picks in the 2019 draft on European-born defensemen. Johansson does seem to have some potential. Spent last year playing in the SHL. Not quite clear where he's going to go this year. I mean, he would have the option to go straight to the American Hockey League, where he's a European player, but he also could remain over there and play another season in Europe before making the jump to North America. Obviously, that decision doesn't have to be made quite yet, but as I've mentioned on several other occasions with the European prospects, many of them will likely stay in Europe, especially if there is no AHL season come this fall, which is quite unlikely, I think, at this point, with the NHL season for 2020-21 likely being delayed until December, possibly January. With the AHL season being questionable, I think we're going to see a lot of these guys stay over there because the European leagues are expected to likely get started up at their normal times. At least at this point, things can always change because we still have a long ways to go before we reach that time. But therefore, I think the odds are he could stay in Europe and play in Sweden another year. But it's still another interesting defensive prospect for Detroit to have in their system and under contract. Now, we also have some news on some NHL players leaving the league to go play over in the KHL. Sharks forward Lucas Rattle has signed a contract to go play in the KHL. He's, of course, played in the NHL and AHL system of the Sharks over the past 2 seasons. Things really didn't work out the best for him in North America. He played 14 NHL games last year and recorded 0 points. So he will be heading to the KHL next season. We also had news on defenseman Joel Persson, who had started playing with the Edmonton Oilers last year, signed a 1-year contract, was traded to the Ducks near the NHL trade deadline. There's news that he's returning to play in the SHL for the Vancouver Lakers, where he had previously played before making the jump over to the NHL. He had signed a one-year deal as an undrafted player. Things didn't really work out for him in North America last year as well, and now he's returning to the SHL. And of course, there's also news that KHL defenseman Nikita Nesterov, who was a former NHL defenseman, mostly for Tampa, played a little bit with Montreal. He is apparently still rumored to be making the jump, mainly linked to the Los Angeles Kings, but I did see reports there could be other teams involved. The Maple Leafs were listed as one of them, but really it seems like they get linked to a lot of players. But we also seen them have some signings like we did with Lettinen here recently, where they kind of come out of the blue, out of nowhere, and signed a European defenseman. Wouldn't be completely shocking. They do have a lot of question marks on their blue line for next year. It was rumored some time ago that there was a 2-year contract on the table from the LA Kings, and apparently that was rejected, but talks are still ongoing, and it's not a foregone conclusion that he won't end up joining them, but we'll see if any other teams kind of swoop in here and try to sign him. But obviously he's played in the KHL the last 3 years, certainly seems to have improved and should have a better shot at success this time around. There's also reports that Edmonton Oilers forward Marcus Granlund will go play in the KHL next year. Apparently he has a contract that's lined up for next season, but even though that's the case and the Oilers are aware of it, they still intend to call upon him for their playoff push here and when the NHL resumes. Now, of course, he may not necessarily be a regular player. He might end up being one of their black aces. Hard to say exactly, but he will be with the team and he will be practicing and be on call, be on standby, whatever it may be. But even though they expect him to be leaving, he's still going to be playing and training with the team until the season is officially over. There's also reports that Buffalo Sabres forward Colposo ended up needing knee surgery and is going to be looking at a recovery time of about 6 weeks or so. Obviously, right now, with the NHL season being on pause and the Sabres not going to be part of the 24-team playoff format, that's really no issue in regards to missing time. Clearly, Colposo, though, has racked up the injuries. He's had a lot of health issues in the last few years. It certainly has a long list of things that have kept him out of the lineup. This is just going to make things even more likely that he might have a hard time regaining his form once he gets back playing. I did see some reports as well that it wouldn't be surprising to see the Buffalo Sabres consider a buyout for him once the offseason finally hits. Colposo will still have a few years left on his deal, around $6 million, but he's at the point in the contract where it's not quite so bad to look at doing a buyout, and that's another one of those contracts from the 2016 free agent class that just have clearly not worked out. There was a lot of bad deals signed July 1, 2016, with this being one of them. It's unfortunate for him. A lot of it does have to do with injuries and health problems that have caused him to not be the player for them, at least on a consistent basis, that they thought they were going to be getting when they signed him. But too many long-term contracts signed that summer to players that were already kind of beyond their prime years or starting to become past their prime a little bit, and they were paying more for past performance, and instead have gotten bad contracts that just have not worked out. So we'll see what the future holds with Colposo and the Sabres. Now, speaking of the Sabres, we're going to go to them next here as well on some potential trade talk for the offseason. As we talked about in yesterday's video, we talked about the possibility of Brandon Montour, defenseman who's an RFA, right shot. Will he be traded or will he be signed? Of course, yesterday's video was called Sign or Trade. We looked at 3 players who are either going to be an RFA or in the final year of their contract, making him a UFA soon, and should the team sign them or trade them? The majority of the comments on that video indicated they felt Montour should be a prime trade candidate. I know we talked about numerous times, and it's clear as day that the Sabres do need help at forward, and they have more than enough defensemen. So logic tells you that Jason Botterill will be working hard, as I'm sure he has been in the past. Why he hasn't been pulled off more trades more recently here, I'm not sure. I mean, understanding now with the pause, but even leading to the deadline and before that, they carried way too many NHL defensemen really for the bulk of the season. So I'm not so sure why a move wasn't made sooner. Maybe he didn't get the deal he wanted and was holding off, trying to weed things out. Between Ristolainen being a trade candidate, maybe a Colin Miller, maybe a Brandon Montour, many felt that Montour would be the most logical choice. And I've seen other reports here that I was reading as well from Sabres reporters indicating the same sort of concept, that Montour was a good defenseman with the Ducks, but just hasn't really fit with the Sabres, and they feel he would be best suited with a different organization. He could get himself back on track. Just didn't really seem to do well and didn't fit in Kruger's system. And as I mentioned in yesterday's video as well, I really felt Montour more more so than Miller, probably as more than Ristolainen as well, might give you a better return to get you a top 6 or a top 9 forward. You might have to make a bigger package deal to get the guy you're looking for, but they clearly could use at least a top 6 or a middle 6 winger, somebody who you can rely on for 20-25 goals, and trading Montour could be that guy. And I can't help but wonder if a team like the Maple Leafs, even though they're division rivals, might be a team that would be a good fit. We've talked about numerous times that the Maple Leafs desperately need a right shot defenseman. They're likely losing Tyson Barrie and Cody Ceci to unrestricted free agency. I don't think the team's really going to push to sign either one, so there's going to be question marks. There's going to be holes on that right side. We've looked at numerous scenarios during this NHL pause periodically of rumors have popped up about some potential fits they could look at there. Montour might be a good choice in that regard. He's not overly old. He's 26 years old. He's an RFA, so he's looking for a new contract for next season and beyond. Probably looking at around $4.5 to $5 million, which is comparable to what Cody Ceci made this past season. And if they can get him to perform at a higher level than Cody Ceci, which to be honest, I don't think would be all that difficult, and get him signed to a multi-year contract, might be a good move. Now, of course, the Leafs have more than enough forwards. So if you take away the fact that they're division rivals, these two teams have actually would make great trade partners, because the Sabres have way too many defensemen and the Leafs have way too many forwards. So you would think they could find some common ground to find one that would fit there. I mean, obviously the main candidates for the Leafs to move would either be a guy like Kasperi Kapanen, maybe an Andreas Johnsson, maybe even an Alex Kerfoot. And you can't help but wonder the long-term future of Zach Hyman as well. I'm sure they'd love to keep Hyman. He's a great fit on the top 6. He's a good character player, well popular with his teammates, but he might be proved too difficult to sign here as well in a couple of years because he's only got one more year left on his contract. We've seen the Leafs trade with the Senators on multiple occasions. Considering both teams are in very different spots right now, the Leafs are trying to become contenders. The Sabres are just trying to become playoff contenders. I don't really see it being an issue. They might have to overpay a little bit to make it happen, where sometimes you see that within divisional trades. But either way, I think it'd be a good fit. And to me, Montour makes the most sense, maybe even more so than Ristolainen for them to move out. As it does seem as though with some recent comments between Botterill and Kruger that Ristolainen is somebody they really value. And if they really feel that way and they're being honest and want to keep him as a core player, then it only makes sense that Montour be moved out. They got youngsters like Dahlin and Jokiharju. I don't see them going anywhere. Jokiharju was a great pickup for them. You throw in guys like Ristolainen and Colin Miller. You get Jake McCabe, and you have some other younger prospects coming up as well. As their younger defensemen start to get even more experience and grow into those roles, then they can certainly, even continue to make that blue line stronger over time. And of course, the Sabres are going to have a pretty decent draft pick in the 2020 draft. Depending on where they pick, maybe they can grab another solid blue liner, but they might prefer to go after a forward. It really boils down to where they're at in the draft selection, and who's available ultimately will decide which route they go, because where they do need desperate help at the forward position. But at the same time, they've gotten some guys like a Dylan Cousins recently as well. They still have Casey Middleside they're trying to groom into being a more productive player. So hard to say how they go about things, but I would not rule out a Brandon Montour trade, and I think the Maple Leafs very well would make a logical destination for him given both teams' circumstances. Now, we also heard some rumblings on defenseman Chris Tanev of the Vancouver Canucks. Of course, he's been a player who's had a lot of rumors around him in the past couple of years. Basically, in an interview, he said that he understands it's going to be difficult to keep him in Vancouver, that he might have to sign a one-year contract, and he could see a lot of players doing a one-year deal, doing short-term contracts, hoping for the league finances and revenue to kind of bounce back. So they can get back to playing and get fans in attendance and all that, and that he might be willing to do that to stay in Vancouver. It sounds like he'd be willing to take just about any term he could to remain there. At least that's what he said. And it's believed that the coaching staff do value him. He's been a good mentor for Quinn Hughes, and I think they'd be interested in keeping him around. It's just going to be very, very difficult to do. I mean, you have to think that the Canucks' top priorities will be priority one, signing Jacob Markstrom, who they have proven with him out of the lineup, especially for a good stretch this year, that he is ultra important to their success. And I'm sure they'd be very interested in keeping Tyler Toffoli after the way he fit in after being acquired at the trade deadline. Of course, the Canucks are going to be in this 24-team format. If they really can make some noise and go on a playoff run and win a round or two, then obviously we're going to kind of see as well some players who might be kind of playing their way into being a big part of the team's future as well. So a lot of question marks in Vancouver. Whether or not Chris Tanev stays or goes through free agency is certainly one of them. I know Troy Stetcher's another one. His future is certainly unclear at this point, but Tanev appears to want to stay and understands that it very well might have to be a shorter term contract to make it happen. But either way, no matter where Tanev goes, I don't see him getting a lot of term anyway. As much as he's a decent defenseman, he's been banged up. He gets hurt a lot, missed a lot of time, and I can see a lot of teams maybe being a little cautious with that. Given the landscape of the NHL and his past history of injuries, I don't think Tanev's going to be getting a long-term regardless on where he signs, but we'll see if he winds up staying in Vancouver, which is, of course, appears to be his first choice at this point in time. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down below in the comment section on everything discussed, and we can discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.